Texas has long relied heavily on local property taxes, in part because the state has no income tax, to fund schools and services. As a result, Texas homeowners face some of the nation's highest property tax rates. For example, in 2023, the median Texas home paid about $4,274 in annual property taxes. As home values and local spending keep rising, those tax bills grow every year. Homeowners are increasingly worried they may soon be priced out of their own homes, as Texas Governor Greg Abbott warned. Abbott recently said that rising property taxes are the main threat to affordability for Texas homeowners, and he stressed that without intervention, more people could indeed lose their homes to soaring costs. He noted that the state already spent a record $51 billion in the last legislative session on temporary tax cuts. But those were only short-term relief. That will improve your next property tax bill, Abbott said. But what's going to happen to the one after that? Those property taxes just keep going up. Abbott's tax reform plan. Motivated by these concerns, Governor Abbott has made property tax reform a centerpiece of his campaign as he prepares to run for another term. He would become Texas's longest-serving governor if re-elected. Launching his 2026 re-election campaign in late 2025, Abbott argued it's time to drive a stake through the heart of local property tax hikes for good and turn the tables on local taxing authorities. He framed it as putting power back in the hands of taxpayers. In his speeches, Abbott said emphatically, "It's time to end local tax increases. We're going to hand the reins back to the people." In other words, he insists the state must radically change the property tax system to protect homeowners. Abbott's message, reported under headlines like "Texas Governor Warns Homeowners, Big Changes Coming in 2025 to 2026. Is that major reforms are needed soon? Or homeowners will face unbearable new taxes? Abbott has since unveiled a detailed plan with 5 major proposals to give homeowners relief and limit local government's tax-raising power. In broad terms, his goal is to restrain local spending and taxation and give residents a stronger say. As Abbott put it, Texas is not just a state, it's our home, our legacy. We'll protect what we've built and finish what we started by carrying Texas into a bright future. In practical terms, this means halting runaway local tax hikes and handing more control to taxpayers. Abbott has outlined the following 5 key changes. Cap local spending growth. Abbott says the root cause of high property taxes is that cities, counties, school districts, and other local governments keep raising their budgets and tax rates each year. He proposes strict limits on local government spending, modeled after the state's own spending caps. Under his idea, each local taxing entity could only increase its budget by a fixed amount each year, no more than 3.5%, or the rate of inflation, whichever is higher. In Abbott's words, the state already has 5 legal limits that limit our ability to increase spending, so the same kind of cap should apply to any local government that collects property taxes. The intention is that by tying spending to population growth and inflation, local tax bills won't spiral upward unchecked. Require voter approval for tax hikes. Currently, local governments can raise property tax rates without a direct vote of the people beyond electing officials. Abbott's plan would change that. He wants any future property tax increase to require voter approval, and not just a simple majority. Rather, a supermajority of 2/3 of voters would have to agree. He notes that many homeowners don't even notice when their taxes go up, so by law, every tax increase would have to go to a referendum. As he puts it, "I want the people's strong approval for every tax increase." This means if a city council or school board wants to raise taxes, it must hold an election and convince 66% of voters to okay it. Supporters say this would serve as a powerful check. Anytime officials want more taxes, they'll have to ask the taxpayers themselves. Citizen rollback referendums. In addition to requiring votes on tax hikes, Abbott would give taxpayers the ability to actively lower taxes. His plan lets residents petition to roll back their local property tax rate. If a certain threshold of voters, Abbott proposed about 15% of registered voters, sign a petition, a binding referendum would be triggered to reduce the tax rate. In effect, this gives citizens a tool to force a tax cut if they believe taxes have gone too high. Abbott argues this would put real power in homeowners' hands. Whenever people feel overtaxed, they could gather signatures and hold a local vote to cut the rate. Reform property appraisals. Texas property taxes are based on annual appraisals of home values, and skyrocketing appraisals have driven up bills. Abbott proposes two reforms here. First, he says homes should not be reappraised every single year. Instead, he suggests appraisals be conducted only once every 5 years. That way, homeowners wouldn't see their taxable value rise annually due to market booms. Second, he would cap how much a home's taxable value can rise each year. Currently, that cap is 10%. Abbott would lower it to 3% per year. There's no reason for you to have to go through that appraisal process every single year, he explained. Together, these changes mean that even if home prices shoot up, individual homeowners would face much slower property tax growth. Eliminate the school district property tax. This is the boldest part of Abbott's plan. In Texas, the largest portion of a homeowner's property tax bill typically funds the local public schools. Abbott proposes to gradually reduce that school portion to zero. He wants a constitutional amendment to phase out and eventually end property taxes for schools altogether. That property tax should be reduced to zero, Abbott said, adding that voters themselves must approve this change via a referendum. In practice, if enacted, it would mean homeowners pay no property tax for schools, a dramatic cut in their total bills. Together, these 5 proposals would fundamentally remake Texas's property tax system. Abbott's team argues it would give homeowners major relief and curb local government's unchecked taxing. At a news conference, Abbott's spokesman summed it up. This plan will rein in runaway local spending and appraisals and put power back in the hands of taxpayers, not local tax collectors. Impact on homeowners. If these changes go through, many Texas homeowners would immediately feel relief. For example, slowing appraisal growth to 3% and requiring less frequent appraisals would dramatically slow annual tax increases. Instead of seeing double-digit increases each year, most homeowners might only see gradual rises tied to inflation. Capping local spending means fewer surprise budget-driven tax hikes, and perhaps most significantly, cutting out the school tax would slash the biggest piece of the tax bill. To put things in perspective, in November 2025, Texas voters approved a set of constitutional amendments that already raised the homestead exemption, the non-taxable portion of a home's value, from $100,000 to $140,000. In practical terms, that change alone shaved hundreds of dollars off the typical Texas homeowner's school tax bill. The Texas average $302,000 home would save about $490 per year on school taxes under the higher exemption. Additionally, businesses got a similar break. Up to $125,000 of inventory per business was exempted from local taxes. State Senator Paul Bettencourt, who pushed those measures, noted that voters embraced higher exemptions as a way to keep people in their homes and to lower their property tax bills. In short, even without Abbott's pending proposals, the new laws and exemptions mean many Texans will see hundreds fewer dollars on their 2025 tax bills. If Abbott's plan goes further, especially eliminating school taxes, homeowners could see their bills drop even more dramatically. Warnings and criticisms. Yet critics caution that such large tax cuts won't be free. Ending the school property tax creates a massive budget gap. That tax currently provides a major share of public school funding. Removing it without a new revenue source could leave Texas schools scrambling. Education advocates and some editorial writers have been alarmed. An editorial in the Dallas Morning News called Abbott's school tax plan irresponsible, and a Houston Chronicle columnist warned it would starve public schools of funds. The concern is real. Absent the school tax, the state would have to replace those funds from somewhere, likely the general budget. Abbott's critics say the governor has not clearly explained how to plug that hole without cutting essential services. Economists point to broader issues too. Texas is already budgeting $51 billion over 2023 to 2025 to fund current property tax breaks. That expenditure has been possible thanks to massive budget surpluses from booming oil and sales tax revenue. But if the economy slows or energy prices fall, sustaining such subsidies could become hard. And because several new tax breaks, like the homestead exemption increase, are now written into the Constitution, the state would have to make up the money by cutting other budget items if revenues fall. Tomorrow's tax cuts could become tomorrow's deficits, budget analysts warn. Southern Methodist University politics professor Calvin Gilson encapsulates the dilemma well. He notes that Texas has long debated eliminating property taxes, but in practice it's nearly impossible. Texas's public services have been funded like a three-legged stool of taxes: property taxes, sales taxes, and income taxes. Texas famously has no income tax, meaning it relies heavily on the other two. Gilson points out that without property taxes, the state would have to make up vast revenue shortfalls with sales taxes alone, which experts say isn't realistic. As he put it, eliminating property taxes is implausible because sales taxes simply cannot carry the load. In other words, slashing property taxes without adding new taxes elsewhere could leave state and local governments underfunded. Political path and timeline. Legally, Abbott cannot unilaterally rewrite tax laws. He needs legislative and voter approval. His big proposals, like ending school taxes or changing appraisals, would require amendments to the Texas Constitution under Texas rules. That means the legislature must pass each amendment by a 2/3 vote in both chambers, and then they must be ratified by Texas voters in a statewide election. Even though Republicans control the legislature, these changes are sweeping, and there could be dissent even within his party. Observers note that while Texans generally favor lower taxes, lawmakers will have to reconcile tax cut promises with the need to fund education and services. Abbott himself emphasized he cannot cut taxes permanently without legislative approval. So throughout 2025, his proposals will face intense debate in the state legislature. Committees and lawmakers will weigh the public's demand for relief against the budget consequences. If the legislature approves any amendments, then Texas voters would decide the final outcome at the ballot box. The earliest likely opportunity is the November 2026 general election, when the governorship is on the ballot. At that point, voters could approve or reject the amendments, for example, whether to eliminate school property tax or cap appraisals. Some have speculated a special election in early 2026 could be called, but it's more probable Abbott will push to bundle these changes in 2026's high turnout election. In any case, property tax reform will be a central campaign issue for both Abbott and his challengers in 2026. Abbott is running on these ideas, while opponents, likely Democrats, will criticize the plan's impact on schools and public services. Voters will ultimately choose between lower taxes and strong funding for education and services. If Abbott wins and pushes the amendments through, he could cement a lasting legacy, becoming the longest-serving Texas governor. If he fails to get legislative support or loses the election, the proposals may stall or be scaled back. What's next for homeowners? In the short term, Texans will immediately see relief from the measures already approved in late 2025. That means on 2024 and 2025 home values. The first $140,000 is now exempt from school taxes. cutting hundreds from those tax bills in 2025. Similarly, small businesses will save on inventory taxes up to $125,000. These changes take effect early 2025, so many homeowners and businesses are already breathing easier. Looking ahead to the 2025 legislative session, we should expect heated debate. Abbott's five-point plan will likely be filed as bill proposals. Lawmakers will scrutinize each piece. For example, how to replace school funding if that tax is cut, or how strict to make spending caps. The outcome will become clearer as session committees and floor votes proceed. If enough legislators agree, some items may clear the House and Senate. Any approved amendments would then go on the ballot for voters, likely November 2026. If not, some parts of the plan may never materialize. Conclusion. In summary, Governor Greg Abbott has indeed laid out real, specific policies aimed at shielding Texas homeowners from rising property taxes. He has promised radical steps to protect homeowners and is already laying the legal groundwork. So while headlines like "big changes coming in 2025 to 2026" may sound dramatic, the substance behind them is very real. If Abbott's proposals are approved by the legislature and voters, Texas could see a historic overhaul of its property tax system in the next 2 years. But the final outcome depends on legislative votes and what Texas voters decide. For homeowners, this is a hopeful time. They may enjoy lower taxes, but it's also uncertain. We'll have to watch closely which measures actually pass and when they take effect. For now, one thing is clear. Property tax reform is front and center in Texas politics, and major changes in 2025 to 2026 are certainly a real possibility. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more.